Good morning. I'm Hank Perritt. I'm the Dean, and I would like to welcome you to Chicago-Kent College of Law, to Illinois Institute of Technology, to the 10th CALI Conference on Law School Computing, and to the second workshop on distance learning in law school. So we've got a lot of things going on here all at the same time. This conference started 10 years ago. And it was the brainchild, in many respects, of Tom Bruce at Cornell Law School, who already had been working to encourage people like us who were enthusiastic about the potential of computer technology to improve legal education, to exchange ideas with each other. And over the years, my colleague Ron Staudt, John Mayer, Peter Martin, from whom you will hear virtually in a few minutes, and Tom and others have continued the effort to give us an opportunity to provide leadership in the revolution that is underway in legal automation. Some years, the purpose for the conference has been to enable us to persuade other people of the correctness of things that we know to be true. That was the case in 1990, when there were still a lot of people who doubted whether law professors and law students and practicing lawyers should have computers on their desks. We knew that they should. And one of the important purposes of this conference then was to embolden us to persuade people in the various parts of the profession with whom we interact that computer technology could enhance their activities. Then a few years later, the question was whether the internet, as opposed to proprietary closed networks, would be significant in law school and legal profession computing. We knew that it would be, and the purpose for this conference in those years was to help us persuade other people of the potential of the internet. But sometimes we don't have answers as much as we have questions. And the best purpose for this conference is to help us crystallize the questions so that we can work together to find the most appropriate answers. That's where we are, I would submit to you, with distance learning. Distance learning is the great frontier of law school and legal profession computing now. And I'd like to start out our program today by suggesting to you some of the things that we should focus on as we work together to try out different approaches to distance learning in legal education. And to organize those issues, let me cluster them into three areas. One cluster has to do with teaching, a second cluster has to do with tuition, and a third cluster has to do with technology. First of all, teaching. I think we did a good deed last year with the very able assistance and leadership from Peter Martin in focusing our first conference on distance learning and legal education, not on technology, but on law teaching, to try to understand more deeply than we usually do what it is that goes on in a good first-year Socratic classroom, and what it is about that experience that requires face-to-face group interaction, and what it is about that and other aspects of JD education that can be enhanced by the use of technology and may occur at a distance. We continued that exploration of how we can enhance teaching and learning in law schools in the conference that the American Bar Association Consultant for Legal Education sponsored in the fall of last year. And I'd like to describe to you briefly what we think at Chicago-Kent is the most interesting model to deploy as a prototype for distance learning in a JD program. We don't believe currently that you can do a good job of JD education entirely remotely and entirely technologically. Good teaching and learning to think like a lawyer require some face-to-face contact between students and professors and among students. But we don't have to spread the face-to-face contact over 16-week semesters packaged in 50-minute classes. And so what we hope to launch on an experimental basis as early as January of next year, assuming faculty approval here and ABA acquiescence, is what we call an EJD program that would begin with an intensive period of a week to 10 days that we informally call a boot camp. The law students, first-year law students, beginning their law school program, would come to this boot camp and they would engage in a set of experiences beyond the traditional classroom, including things like mock trials, mock negotiations, and elaborated police ride-along programs that would engage them from the beginning with the excitement and the seriousness of entering the legal profession. And those experiences then would feed the subject matter of traditional first-year courses that would be taught to some extent face-to-face in these intensive sessions, and to some extent, where appropriate, remotely by means of information technology. After this boot camp, the students would go back to where they came, and they would be tied to one another and to their faculty with distance learning technology. They would come back again at the midpoint for a long weekend, and at the end of the semester, they would come again for face-to-face time, when they would do things like oral arguments for moot court, trial ad simulations, and maybe even some oral examinations with their professors. We're excited about this possibility, not because we're excited about the technology. Lots of us love technology, but what we think is exciting about this is the potential that it opens up to do a better job of legal education in these intensive face-to-face periods, which wouldn't be possible without the technology that enables us to do some other things. Now, a couple of more comments on the teaching cluster. As we think about competing models for distance education in law school, I think we must accept that video and audio will be a part of that. If for no other reason, then our customers already are accustomed to seeing video and hearing audio on the web. And if we give them anything less than that, it will look like a cheap product that they will not be interested in. Third, I am dubious that the kind of video that will be an effective teaching tool will be a headshot of a professor lecturing or asking questions for 50 minutes in a classroom. I think we're going to have to be more creative on how we use video clips to engage students and enhance understanding of the subject matter. Now to the second cluster, tuition. It's really about more than tuition, but I needed a T word in the interest of alliteration. The second cluster really is about economics. And I don't think we have a clue yet as to how the economics of this are going to work. We understand some things. One thing we understand is that it's going to require much more investment by good teaching faculty to put together a good course, whether entirely through distance learning technology or a combination of intensive face-to-face time and technology. And we also understand that it's going to require a lot of good technical support. Those two things cost money. But we don't understand much yet about whether we should be thinking about smaller classes to enhance student-faculty interaction, or whether we will be thinking about much larger classes in order to recover the cost of the investment. And in that regard, we don't know much yet about the staying power, the economic lifetime of materials that we put together. The economics work much better if something you put together for a first-year torts course will be usable for 5 or 6 years. But we don't know whether we can do that. And if it's usable only for 1 year, then you're going to have to make the heavy investment over and over again. We don't know much about student demand, and we don't know much about price elasticity of that student demand. My sense is that when we start these experiments that we will be doing, that we should charge a premium price for this product because it offers added convenience to the students, and if we do it right, it will be a better educational product than we're able to do in the conventional model. Finally, the technology cluster. Here, I just want to suggest a couple of questions that we all should ponder as we go through the conference and as we go about our business after we go home. First of all, how exactly should we deliver the video that the pedagogy seems to require? My sense is that the specialized channels for video conferencing and video delivery are short-term transitional, and that where our focus really should be is on video over IP. We can discuss what we think of video over IP because we're going to see some of it in a minute. We're going to see Peter Martin via video over IP. It's important to realize that the question of video delivery is not, in my view, about bandwidth. The bandwidth will be there. It is almost there already. And everything that's happening in the telecommunications and internet access marketplaces suggests that the bandwidth will be there within a year to 18 months. But we have not given sufficient thought to how we're going to deliver streaming video, for example, or even streaming audio off the kinds of servers that we have now, when we may have as many as 50 or 100 simultaneous TCP channels that are supposed to carry this video. Multicasting is not yet sufficiently standard or widely available for it to be clear that that's an answer to the problem. And I don't know how we think about the server architecture when demands are placed on us to feed lots and lots of simultaneous customers who want to look at video. Second technology issue that I want to alert you to, or more likely to reinforce your existing alertness, is wireless. It seems to me we're finally seeing some breakthroughs in terms of broadband wireless protocols and of FCC licensing of spectrum that will make broadband wireless a reality in our lives, surely within the next 3 years. And of course, there's lots of experimentation in terms of the kinds of devices that should be used to receive the information that can be transmitted over these broadband wireless channels. Palm 7s, possibly notebook computers with wireless modems, other possibilities. And we need to think hard about where broadband wireless can be most useful in the law school environment. Maybe what we ought to be thinking about is making sure that our students have the capability to access their course materials and receive distance learning courses wherever they are, on the bus, train, or even in the automobile, using wireless devices. And we surely ought to be wary of investing hundreds of thousands of more dollars in wired LANs and desktop computers in computing labs in law schools, when perhaps what we should be thinking about is equipping our law schools with wireless hubs and figuring out how the students get equipped with wireless capability on their computing equipment. Those are just some of the questions that I think might be in our minds as we go through this conference. And now I'd like to pass the baton to Ron Staudt, who has been one of the chief pioneers, among the handful of pioneers in this area for almost 20 years now. Ron's going to talk to us a little more about some particular distance learning approaches at Chicago-Kent and how these will extend more broadly into the legal profession. And then Peter Martin, who is another of the handful of authentic pioneers, will talk to us about some of what he has learned and is in the process of learning about teaching regular classes using these technologies. Thanks for being here.
As is frequently the case, are we on here, David? When deans and faculty members work together, we don't always communicate perfectly. I really don't intend to talk very much about Chicago-Kent distance learning highlights. What I'd like to do is give you a different set of perspectives about your participation in this gathering and your role in the next 10 years of law school computing and technology in our profession. I urge you to take a look at what Chicago-Kent has done, and you can do that by going to the website Chicago-Kent kentlaw.edu, and hopefully this is going to work. Steve, Steve, are you here? There you are. And if it doesn't, you can just come up and do these hand slides. And we have a number of presentations through this fantastically rich conference about Chicago-Kent activities and distance learning, and there are about 20 different resources, activities, projects, faculty initiated approaches, and so on that we're going to be using. You need to get up here? Yeah. But my sense is that
with the wireless phone.
And what I'd like you to begin thinking about is a set of broader issues. Is this on? Upside down? Now we're on. There's a set of broader issues that occurred to me since I stood on this podium a year ago opening the first distance learning conference. I guess Steve is still working on it. Well, let me talk through these broader issues. In the fall of 1999, I think October, I joined about 80, 90 people who were identified as experts or leaders in the legal profession at the Biltmore Hotel in Phoenix at a conference called Seize the Future. And we sat in the room, and there were about this many of us, while Tom Peters and Gary Hamill and Jack Landry, the leading gurus of the internet revolution, who are writing the books that are selling 50 million copies at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.com, told us what was happening to the world. And what they said was happening to the world was a change that was as powerful as the Industrial Revolution and the Renaissance put together, yet it was going to be crammed in a period of about 10 years. They said it was massive, dislocating change. Now, maybe they weren't as powerfully right as they thought they were at the time, after sort of the March-April stock market crash in technology. And I hope none of you were buying in early March, as I was. But I think they had most of it right. And they shook the leadership of the American Bar Association and the lawyers from big law firms who were there, and they told them things like, you must hire very young people, people with green hair and pierced bodies. Why? Because they are the ones that are being innovative. They're the ones that are creative. They're the ones that can bring diversity of thought to your business as a law firm. They said the biggest problem in adapting to these massive dislocating changes, the biggest problem was not getting new ideas in, but getting old ideas out. And the third thing they said that I carried away with me and I can't get out of my mind, and it worries me even as I think about us, because I think in some ways we are inside in a very deep and integrated way, inside the academy, in a way that was clearly not true 10 years ago. And by virtue of John Mayer's work and the work of CALI over these past 10 years is very, very likely to be true now. But the other thing they said is that you can't make the kind of change that you're going to need to make from the inside. That Bill Gates had to change IBM from the outside. That Jeff Bezos had to change Barnes & Noble, launching Amazon from the outside. That E-Trade had to change Schwab and Merrill Lynch from the outside. That worries me today, and I'm not sure how we address that set of issues. But let's think about what we can do and how we might fit using distance learning issues and approaches, and thinking about how we might be a part of this change in the profession as we go through the next several days. On March 27th, on the 10th floor of this building, 50 people gathered at the request of Bill Paul, who's the president of the ABA. Their job was, we're up here so I can show you a website. Their job was, after a year of preparation, to figure out how technology and the kinds of seize the future changes I've just described might best be used to solve the following problem. There are too many lawyers that don't have enough to do. And you may not believe that based on the kinds of lawyers that we deal with, but in large parts of the country, that's true. And there are way too many legal problems that are going unsolved by people who are of modest means but are willing to pay something for those solutions. And what we found after a year of study, and the kind of people we brought into the room on the 10th floor, were entrepreneurs who were doing the Jeff Bezos kind of thing by putting up sites on the web where law could be practiced. And some very influential people are getting involved in this. Arthur Miller, who was a controversial person in absentia when we met last year, is involved in one of them. I think it's AmeriCounsel.com, and there's MyLawyer.com, and the big publishing companies, Lexis and West, are putting up sites that do some of this kind of thing. The question is, how will the ABA react to this? And the 10th floor gathering said, you must be open to this. You must embrace the opportunity to deliver legal services to people who need legal services by matching needs and resources using the web capabilities that are feasible and possible. Today,
Ron.
Well, thank you, John. Today, the Legal Services Corporation will have a conference call. And I have to miss a part of the morning meeting because I'm a part of that conference call. And the purpose of the call is to decide how the Legal Services Corporation is going to spend $4.25 million in technology innovation grants. And legal services organizations that deliver legal services to the poor across the country have submitted the most fabulous array of proposals about how these technologies, voice and data over IP, neural nets and voice-activated kiosks, artificial intelligence tools that help identify where a domestic abuse victim needs to go to do the right thing in order to protect themselves and their children and get relief that is necessary. Fabulous changes are occurring in that environment. Over the past year, in cooperation with the National Center on State Courts, this law school has begun a website initiative aimed at providing access to the internet and internet resources and tools for judges. And we've gathered in most of the judicial organizations, the American Judges Association, the Judicial Division of the ABA, and others, and we're putting these groups together and trying to organize them in ways to allow judges to communicate with one another, because the least automated part of our system is the judiciary. And it's about to embark on a 10-year investment in electronic filing and back office computing that will be revolutionizing in its impact on how law is practiced. But today, judges are not automated and courts are not automated. In addition, that Justice Web Collaboratory project, I can't seem to get these websites up, that Justice Web Collaboratory project, there we go, is combining to do with the State Justice Institute, we hope, and several other foundations, a project that's right in the middle of this Seize the Future cluster of issues. It's a project that's aimed at trying to solve the problem of finding ways to get access to courts for people who don't have lawyers. And what we're finding in our early investigations is that courts and their rules are made for judges and lawyers, not for people who want to get justice. That they're too complicated, that people don't know where to go, they don't know how to get through these systems, and millions and millions and millions of people want to do that themselves. I mean, the percentages of divorces in California, in Phoenix, and in Washington that are handled today with one or more parties unrepresented would stagger you, 70, 80, 90% in some of these courtrooms. Now, what does all this mean, and how does it become relevant to what we're talking about in terms of distance education, and how does it lead into Peter's reconstruction of legal education, which we'll do immediately after this? Well, my sense is that there are common themes in all these processes, common themes that put law schools and you in a very powerful and important position. I mean, judges are not automated. People find courts too complicated, and law schools aren't as good as they need to be. I mean, the message of last year's conference, and to some extent, Peter Martin's strong message in November in Indianapolis when we talked about distance learning is that this is not a sacred cow. We have to change this environment. We have to take it apart, find out what we do well, and put it back together using all these new tools and capabilities so that in the end, we have better education than we have now. We don't have cheaper education necessarily, and Hank's talked about that. And we may not have faster education in the sense of cheaper, faster, and better, but we'll have better education, and that's the challenge. And I think that's the same challenge that we face when trying to deliver the internet and those capabilities to judges and make them be able to deliver justice better. And the same challenge that we have when we try to figure out how to help lawyers who want to serve clients of modest means get access to legal services, and the same challenge that we face when we want to provide tools and mechanisms that will allow people without lawyers to come and get access to justice in some effective way. It's a computer-human interface problem. It's a problem of how we translate complex knowledge, difficult concepts, law, into action. It's not that different to teach a first-year student how to take apart a case and what the structure of courts are and how law begins to work in theory to teaching a domestic violence abuse victim or someone seeking a divorce how to navigate their way through the clerk's office and get the things that they need. And the tools that Hank has identified and the opportunities that you represent set the stage, I believe, for a new opportunity that's right now in teaching, in research, and service. As we investigate these new methods for teaching that Peter is going to show you after his years of work in this area, we're doing research on the process, and my hope is that what we deliver, in addition to a better legal education system, right, is a better justice system. And I don't think there's anybody in the world better qualified, more interested, and more enthusiastic about doing that than the people that are in this room and who will join you over the next couple of days. I encourage you to take up that torch and make that happen. All right, Peter, are you ready?
Hi.
I'm going to try to maximize you. If I can manage this. You're maximized. Would you like to do the introduction to your demonstration here?
Greetings all. There are many reasons I wish I could spend the next several days with you. The reasons I cannot and must instead participate at a distance. One is that I am right now doing some of the teaching for my fall course. Reminder that the future shape of distance learning represents at least as much change in the timing of instruction as in its place. A second reason I must be here in Ithaca is that I'm a member of the Provost's Advisory Committee on Distance Learning, and it meets this afternoon. That committee was created in haste in April after the University Senate voted no confidence on a Board of Trustees plan to create a for-profit subsidiary to do distance learning. It is working straight through the summer. Committee on which I have served during the past 30 years has done that. Of the unprecedented urgency of the issues surrounding the phrase distance learning. It has intrigued me that faculty people across the university do this as Cornell's Arthur Miller Committee. That's him, and I say that with great respect, has become emblematic of a phenomenon that most academics find both confusing and threatening. I know because I've been asked with some frequency to explain how my activities differ from Arthur's. To me, the question betrays deep confusion. Why am I not like Arthur Miller? Shall I count the ways? The first 100 are obvious. Zing over. 101. My teaching on the net has been done as a Cornell faculty member, and all the resulting revenues flow to Cornell. The interest issues in this field, none here. 102, I'm doing this with, rather than arguably in competition with Cornell, because I can. Cornell's Legal Information Institute provides both the technological and the institutional infrastructure within the university that Arthur has lacked at Harvard. 103, my role in the courses I have taught via the net and will teach this coming year is no different from my role in courses I regularly teach at Cornell. This is no star followed by auxiliaries model. I shall present, pose questions, respond, provide feedback, final exams for all the law students I am teaching at a distance. Finally, my students will not be asked, as you now are, to watch my lips. They will have to listen to my voice, but I am convinced, as Hank is, that there are many more useful things to bring to the screen than a talking professor head. Arthur's. This presentation attempts to introduce some of those ideas, but in one sense, there's a serious problem. The thing is totally wrong. This mode of presentation is designed for the desktop, an individual workstation, not a large screen in a darkened hall. The only corrective I can think of is to call on your imagination. Imagine yourself in your office or your home, curious about what Martin is up to now and why. You've found the right moment, though if there should be an interruption, your hand is on the mouse and you can readily pause or even defer the presentation. Don't think of what you are about to see on the screen as relentless PowerPoint, but as web-based material that you can linger over, print as you wish. As Ron or Steve now launches the presentation, imagine your hand on the mouse. One model for distance legal education, a work in progress. The place to begin is with the familiar. This coming year I shall offer 2 courses that I have taught in thoroughly conventional fashion at Cornell to students at several other participating schools via the net. The courses are Introduction to Copyright Law in the fall, Social Security Law in the spring, 3-credit upper-level electives. Both are centered on important and complex federal statutes, the Copyright Act in the one case, Social Security Act in the other, rather than practice skills or topics of legal history or theory. In these courses, my aims as teacher are, I believe, quite ordinary. They include building a solid understanding of the current contours of the law and how to approach the key issues from several important lawyer perspectives, including that of advocate, counselor or advisor, and in the case of copyright, arrangement maker. And finally, from the perspective of policy analyst or critic. On the points on which change is proposed or imminent, we'll work at exposing the contending policy and political forces at work. Each course will progress through a sequence of topics designed to develop the important doctrines, issues, and practice challenges of the field. The students I'll be working with will all be experienced law students for whom this is but a small fraction of a full law school experience. That relieves me of the challenge Concord has undertaken, providing the entire range of educational experiences that comprise a law school educational agenda. It provides me with students for whom certain patterns of work, educational expectations, and overall frame of reference can be assumed. But it also results in the need to bring students to take this educational anomaly seriously, despite its lack of contextual cues on which they may have come to depend, a topic to which I'll return. The most conspicuous element these courses will lack is regularly scheduled classroom meetings. They will, of course, have the other 2 elements that comprise a standard law school course, a rigorous program of assigned readings, and a final exam. Through a combination of digital components and pedagogical strategies, I shall try to achieve all or most of what I undertake in those classroom meetings in my courses that use them, while achieving gains by breaking out of the classroom's constraints. What are those components and pedagogical strategies? Both courses will employ a scheduled progression through a sequence of topics paced by web-based discussion and mandatory interactive exercises. Hypermedia presentation, streaming audio linked to assigned texts and supplementary materials. Computer-based tutorials and exercises similar to those CALI has long distributed, tightly integrated with the readings and presentation material. Asynchronous but paced teacher-student, student-student written discussion, frequently begun after all have submitted tentative positions on the issue or problem in review. Short writing assignments and problem-solving assignments submitted via the net for my evaluation and feedback, and a final exam. Let me try briefly to relate each of these items to the key practices and purposes that I associate with classroom meetings. Like most law professors, I use the classroom to profess, to express my views. My classroom sessions are, students tell me, highly interactive and sometimes frustratingly full of questions, but more than half the time I spend with students in classroom meetings is time in which I am speaking. Depending on the time, topic, and adequacy of the assigned readings, I will speak in order to place the assigned case, the current statutory provision or topic, in historic or practical or theoretical context. Other times I speak to summarize the sometimes conflicting views of legal scholars not represented in the text, to focus student attention on certain key themes or points, to present one or more problems for student reflection and later discussion, or to report on recent legal developments. While I speak on these and other matters, I try to draw students' attention to particular passages in the assigned reading, and on occasion to draw diagrams or put key terms and an outline on the chalkboard, or more recently a projected computer screen. I also speak in response to student views, to critique, to challenge, to affirm, or to move the discussion forward. The web-based hypermedia technology we are using in this presentation offers a powerful alternative to gathering students in a room at a particular time for most of these purposes. Consider what a streaming digital recording of the teacher's voice linked to the assigned text and other relevant materials can mean for students. Most obviously, it means that the students need not all gather in the same place at the same time to hear the teacher. The tight integration of text and speech possible with online course materials provides a capability that only high-tech lecture halls and the most nimble of presenters can offer. With this technology, I am able to put the text of an assigned case, the very portion of that case that I am discussing, in front of my eyes and the student's eyes at the point we are focusing upon it. After students have read the Seventh Circuit's American Dental Association decision, which wrestles with the question, can a typology or a taxonomy be copyright protected? I ask the students to focus particularly on Judge Easterbrook's language in paragraph 8, rejecting the district court's view that the taxonomy was not copyrightable because it was functional, an argument that draws upon copyright decisions dealing with lamps and other useful objects. This paragraph cites, among others, Section 102 of the Copyright Act. And we can move, as we continue the discussion, to its text. Furthermore, since this is a text on the web and includes hypertext links to all related portions of the Act, I can follow one or more of them, or a student can. While we are looking at Section 102, we can observe that the critical term is linked, and pause the lecture in order to inspect the definition of the defined term in Section 101. In my online course on Social Security law, I can bring up a chart prepared by the Social Security Administration as I discuss the relative importance of the program's spouse benefits for men and for women. During all of my presentations, each student can exercise a degree of control over the pace no classroom allows.
Imagine a student intervening during a scheduled class to say, "Professor, would you please be quiet for a minute while I think about what you just said? Or while I reread the text of the statute along with associated definitions?" Is it more or less unthinkable that a student would request you to repeat the point you just devoted 5 minutes to developing for any reason, ranging from a belief that your views and the text may conflict to the students having nodded off? Streaming audio allows the student to break in pursuit of greater understanding or mastery in precisely those ways. A student can pause the professor, can replay all or a portion of a presentation, and can even return to a topic that still puzzles toward the end of the course. There is an important, though less visible, increase in control for the teacher. Most of us run classroom sessions to the clock and not to the topic. Whether our school's period is 50 minutes in length, 70 or 120 minutes, that will often be both too long and too short. The period is too short every time the teacher is in the middle of a topic when the time runs out. It's too long for students who need a pause after one point is complete before being ready to think about the next. My conviction, reflected in the design of the online courses I'm preparing for next year, is that the elements in which I speak ought to be broken up into segments that will run uninterrupted for no more than 20 minutes, but that these segments should fit the topic and not that or any other arbitrary length. I have already observed that, like most law teachers, at least those of my generation, my classroom sessions are highly interactive. To what ends do I invite, even require, students to express their inexpert views in the classroom? I trust I can assume your familiarity with, if not full agreement on the principal reasons I do so, without repeating them here. And precisely because student-teacher and student-student exchange is so very important to my pedagogy, I'm enthusiastic about communication tools that break free from the classroom's many constraints. As I see it, the principal trade-off in this new model is substitution of written for face-to-face oral exchange. All the points, ideas, and tentative solutions each student will offer for teacher, fellow student, or programmatic response will have to be presented in written form. For some students, this will, no doubt, be a traumatic shift, and for others, a totally welcome one. In view of the ever greater importance of email and other forms of electronically mediated written communication in the practice of law and other spheres, most law students recognize that whatever their current comfort level, this is an important skill area to develop. A slightly less obvious difference is that discussion and student problem solving in these online courses will be asynchronous. That has numerous advantages. It means, among other things, that students have the same control over when they participate that they have over when they listen to me. It means that more than one issue or problem can be pursued at once. And it means that I can ask all students to express themselves out of earshot of the rest so that discussion can begin with a picture of the entire range of views or levels of understanding within the class. Running an effective and engaging asynchronous discussion is no less challenging than running a successful interactive class, and that is in part because the tools are significantly more flexible. That flexibility brings fresh challenges. Classroom meetings, conducted in real time, serve an important pacing function. In theory, at least, law students don't simply present their students with a bunch of inputs and the ultimate task of achieving mastery by the end of the term. Tuesday's meeting and the following Thursdays are generally conducted with an assumption of student preparation. Those meetings help to keep students on task. Students who haven't done the assigned work on time know they will receive less than full value from the session, and in some classes, including my own, They even know they may be uncovered as unprepared in front of teacher and peers. Importantly, one value discussion sessions have for prepared students is the opportunity for self-appraisal. Whether or not the student expresses herself, discussion between the teacher and others permits her to gauge her own level of understanding against the contributions of others and the teacher's comments. Finally, since the class meeting metronome, to the extent it is effective, marks a parallel progression across the same ground for all students in a course, it maximizes the possibilities for fruitful student-student exchange outside of class. Full-time residential institutions particularly stress the value of learning that occurs informally in the hallway, the library study room, dining facility, or student residence, as members of a class discuss the next day's assignment or the most recent class with one another. These less obvious classroom uses or effects are reflected in my use of numerous devices designed to keep my online courses paced, even though they are asynchronous. My integration of interactive exercises with the assigned readings to enable regular self-appraisal, and my emphasis on the student's accountability for progress and mastery throughout the term, not just at its conclusion. We should talk about barriers. Cost and technology. My experience that they are likely to seem greater than in fact they are. Although surely there are some law school settings where implementing such a multimedia course would require technology investment. There are two sides to the technology access equation. The students need access to computers that can deliver sound through speakers or a set of headphones and a network connection. A few years ago, new computers did not necessarily come with sound. Today, most do. And most young people see to it that they have network connections capable of carrying audio files of far greater bandwidth than my voice requires. As for preparing lectures for digital delivery, the technology is within the reach of most law schools and computer-experienced faculty. For my online presentations next year and for this CALI presentation, I'm making use of software that runs on an ordinary Pentium class computer, now 3 years old. That software cost $69.95 and required very little time to learn. As is generally true, the challenge was not learning how to run the software, but puzzling over exactly what to say and what to have on the screen at the time. The content, not the delivery system, is the big issue. In my view, a far greater challenge is posed by a deeply rooted set of associations and habits. Put simply, many students and most teachers have been so conditioned by prior educational experience that they tightly associate education with the physical cues and traditional practices of the classroom. Particularly students who are dividing their time and attention between courses conducted with conventional classroom meetings and others that use digital alternatives. These students for some time will view virtual classrooms as less real than the physical ones. Given that conditioning and a natural tendency toward procrastination, online education must be conducted and constructed with serious attention to the pacing, accountability, and self-appraisal functions I've already noted. The courses I'm building for next year will have numerous, regular, required student participation points. Every such participation point carries the cost of teacher time and attention, but my belief, based on experience, is that the teacher time gained by recording the presentation components of the course compensate for it. My past experience working with groups of students at a distance persuades me that it is possible to generate effective pacing and accountability with ample opportunity for self-appraisal, as well as student-student interaction without class meetings. But all these elements are drawing my attention as I create the structure for next year's courses. Since our initial course model has numbers of students enrolled at each participating law school, students at each location will be working on the same material and issues during the same block of time. And therefore, informal student-student teaching can occur in the same way it does with classroom-based courses. Indeed, there is a curious way in which it may be encouraged. The experience with computer-based tutorials suggests that they may produce better educational outcomes when students work them as a team, discussing choices as they are presented. Full-throated, unregulated student-student discussion is out of place in a standard classroom meeting. But when students run multimedia presentations that can be paused and rerun at will in pairs or small groups, that need not be the case. Beyond next year, these courses are prototypes. They reflect lessons learned with our prior 3-year internet-based course and represent a model that I believe can be replicated. After a year of testing, we will be eager to share the experience with schools who have joined us in this experiment and others. Holding to the belief that distance education is a mode of teaching that should benefit us all, that it need not divide law schools into provider and consumer institutions. One important element of this generation LII distance course is that it is modular and reusable. Reusability means that these courses are being constructed with an eye toward long-term maintenance. They are modular so that next year's version can be changed without having to be reassembled from the ground up. Modularity also holds promise of a different kind of reuse, one that I'll call versioning. By breaking a course into suitable, reusable modules, it should be possible to assemble separate versions of the same course for quite different student populations, ranging from lawyers pursuing ongoing professional development through domestic law students, to students and professionals in other fields. Both subjects on which the LII will be offering online courses next year, copyright and Social Security, have this potential. In other words, both are topics on which we plan in future to offer versions of the course configured for groups other than law students. But first things first. Modest steps before more ambitious ones. Teaching students whose needs and expectations we know best using online tools that map quite successfully to forms of instruction with which those students are already acquainted. And harnessing the administrative structures and academic standards of the other schools participating with us in this experiment. This should allow us to focus on the pedagogical challenges and the potential of this exciting new educational environment. Thank you for listening to these words and ideas launched from miles away. I remind you that in your imagination, at least, you were free to interrupt me with a mouse click at any point. I look forward to your comments and questions. Those that don't fit into the few minutes we have for this purpose on June 21st can be addressed to me via email. I am martin@lii.law.cornell.edu. Finally, should you want to review any of what I've said or to share this presentation with a colleague, you can replay it from the top. Simply go to the URL you see on this page.
An object lesson using the tools that he's talking about to share ideas about those tools with you. We have, according to our schedule, 12 minutes, John. We're sticking pretty close to schedule for questions from you. Peter is there. Can you hear us, Peter?
I can hear you, Ron. I also could hear myself. Having spoken those words some 48 hours ago, it was a weird time-space dislocation effect.
Well, actually, there was some weirdness here, too. The computer went to sleep for a minute, so the display was black, but I think we got all the pushed slides. And then for a little bit of time, it sounded like the building was breathing, didn't it? I thought maybe it was my mic. But we're ready for your questions, comments, suggestions, and we hope you have some.
Could I just interject one observation, Ron?
Yes, sir.
it seemed to me the fact that the computer went to sleep for a little while, Peter, gave us an interesting supplemental and unplanned experiment. It allowed us to consider how much value the video added compared to the audio. And I guess to stimulate some discussion about this, other people may disagree with me, I thought that your face in the first part of the presentation added very little. Now, maybe that's because I know your shining face and your engaging personal characteristics when you make a presentation. But I thought that for your extemporaneous presentation, that the audio was what mattered and not the video. When we got into the pre-packaged material, it seemed to me that the video added a lot when you were illustrating something, like the texts of the statutes and the illustration of the tutorial. On the other hand, the word slides, the PowerPoint slides, which I think is what we lost when the computer went to sleep, I thought the audio was just fine without that, at least if one concentrated on the audio. It may be that the reinforcement of the word slides help if one's attention is fading in and out, but of course that would never be the case for one of your presentations.
And two things ought to be mentioned about that. One is that we used NetMeeting as the video feed here to show what Peter actually used in his earlier course. Obviously, in our last session last year, we used more powerful video conferencing capabilities, and you can get much better pictures than this, so you don't have the Picasso cubistic picture when people move. But I think in general I agree with that reaction. Peter, do you want to respond to that?
I think I agree with it too, although I wasn't present with you. The one thing that as a classroom teacher has surprised me is the extent to which...
Losing your audio, Peter.
Fact of putting up the equivalent of what I think was termed the PowerPoint slides. That is to say, line of principal points. Students do learn in different ways, and for some, the route into the head is through the ears, but for others, having something that reinforces in outline form is really quite important.
Audience participation. Yes, sir. First row.
Well, I'd like to explore this video issue in a little greater detail. We've seen two different kinds of video today. We've seen the streaming video with Peter Martin in this NetMeeting window here with varying success. It's a very choppy picture. And yet, culturally, people in an audience like to see the speaker. And so, in a sense, I guess I get some value out of that, just looking at the talking head, even though it's somewhat inadequate technologically. The other video that we saw was the prepared PowerPoint slides, which really added a lot of content to what we were listening to. But once with the streaming video puts much greater technological demands on the support and also on the client side. And so I guess the lesson getting from this is that we ought to be concentrating on not streaming video first, but some perhaps prepackaged content on the screen that goes along with the audio. And then perhaps as the technology improves later on, we can add the streaming video as we see here, and maybe add some content to it besides just the talking head. Is that, I don't know if other people are that.
I'm happy to respond to that. Peter, I mean, you've had more experience with that. Could you hear that?
I'm afraid I couldn't, Ron, so that if you could briefly rephrase the comment.
Why don't we pass around your wireless mic?
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, we'll pass around my wireless mic, and then I'll be more stationary. Say it in 6 words or less.
Good morning, Peter. This is Carl Mannheim from Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, but I'm here in Chicago attending a distance learning conference in person.
we knew that. He might not have.
Yeah. That's why I said it. So I just wanted to explore the streaming video issue some more. You made a point earlier about the cultural barriers to distance learning, and I guess there are some cultural attributes that we ought to be taking advantage of, and I think one of them is seeing a talking head. Just as an audience likes to see the speaker. And you know how people say, especially people who wear glasses, say, "I can't hear you because I don't have my glasses on." There does seem to be, you know, a video or a visual component of understanding, and I really wonder whether the talking head, the streaming video that we have here is really not worth pursuing until the technology improves, or should we provide it just simply because of the cultural familiarity that it provides? That was a question.
You want to take a shot at that?
Well, again, I missed part of it because being distant from the mic, I couldn't get the full flavor of it. But one of the points I did hear was the point about the cultural expectation that causes the face to be important. The one in some respects wants to see the teacher. They're all skeptical about that. I think that's true, and so one of the things that I'll do is I will provide some video clips of myself, but it will not be a steady diet for my students. The other thing that I will do is I have offered all participating schools opportunity for a video conference of this type with the students at that school. As a way of talking about the course and becoming acquainted. Sort of immerse ourselves in the narrower bandwidth audio and a link to web pages.
I might give a quick reaction. I've heard, and we'll hear from a UNext represented in our next session, but their human factors guru, Don Norman, says that all their presentations, all their online courses that Cardian University and others and their other executive training courses rely on video of no longer than a minute and a half. They never do more than a minute and a half. And the theory that it's just the bandwidth is too great, and that you don't get enough bang out of the interaction that you would hope to get. The difference is that we're so used to interactive classes that it seems to me a more difficult problem for law school instruction than it would be to teach somebody what profitability is in an accounting structure or something like that. But Edwin will be able to address that later on. Yes.
You just pressed.
Sorry.
Oh. Well,
we'll get back to
you. My name is Rhoda Dawson, and I'm from the Washington College of Law at American University, and we're trying to do distance education. My question is actually twofold. Being a non-academic and a staff person, how do you handle the resistance that you see from your faculty that are not technical? And the second question is, do you find value added in augmenting courses of this sort with vehicles such as Blackboard or Twin or the Internet Classroom provided by LexisNexis?
But let me take a quick shot at that, and then Hank, you have the mic right next to you at this point. I think there are two questions about the first question, two approaches to the first question. One is that if there is resistance to allowing those of us who are trying to sort of push the envelope and do new things to let us do that ourselves from other faculty members, I think that's a serious problem. But I think even this gathering indicates that that's pretty much over. And that's 10 years ago rather than the next 10 years. If the question is how do you get people who are reluctant to do it at all to spend their time doing it, I think we have to prove that it's better. And that's what we're about. That's what we're going to do. And that's what our job is.
My sense on this essentially political question is that the demonstration has to come from regular teaching faculty, and it will be most effective when it comes from faculty who are not already known as technophiles and who teach regular mainstream courses as opposed to technology-oriented courses?
And this is second point. On your second point, the answer essentially is yes. Right, that Webboard and TWEN and Law School in a Box and all the various things that are available out there are tools that can be used in effective ways in these contexts. Yes. And you ought to go see them. A lot of them are here.
I just wanted to comment that I think the best way to get faculty technical is with the students. Students start putting pressure on them. They say, we have friends who go to this law school and that law school, and they do it this way. And the minute that happens, suddenly the faculty become very technical. So I think that's really, get students to bug them, and they'll change immediately.
Actually, our third plenary this morning is about this topic, essentially. So we'll spend a significant focus piece of attention on it. John, I think we're right at 10:15. I think to keep on time, maybe we should make that the last question, and you want to pick up and carry us forward into the next things we want to do. Peter, do you have a last word?
No, I've enjoyed the discussion and look forward to hearing from those of you that I didn't hear speak.
Hank, do you have a last word? All right. All right.
Thank you, Peter. I get the most fun task here. I think I'm going to close your window. Great. Let's take a 15-minute break. Get back here 10:30 sharp. I'll take care of some of my housekeeping at that point, and we'll be on with our next session. Thank you. Refreshments in the concourse.